My name is Jose Mondragon, and my presentation is on racial inequalities in homeownership and housing market discrimination. This topic explores how access to housing, which sometimes many of us can see as essential and accessible, has been shaped by race, class, and historical policy decisions in the US. Here's what I'll cover today. I'll go over why home ownership is such a key path to wealth in America. Then some of historical racial housing discrimination decisions that took place back in the 1900s, and as an effect can created those that segregation and discrimination in the housing market. I'll look also at how discrimination still affects the housing market today, how the labor market connects to these inequalities, and we'll go over some potential solutions to the problem. So first off, why is being a homeowner so important in the US? Homeownership is central to building wealth and financial security in the US. When someone owns a home, they build equity, meaning that the value of their property increases over time while their debt decreases. So if you think about it, if you spend money in buying a home, you're actually not spending, you're investing, because that is going to become a good for you. It's going to become wealth for you, and you'll be able to either keep it, you would be able to transfer that into liquid capital. You'd be able to transfer that property onto your next family's generations. So it's one of the best investments that we can do. And also, according to the Federal Reserve data, the median net worth of homeowners is about 40 times greater than that of renters. So that just gives us an idea of the degree of inequality that exists for homeowners in the US. And when homeownership is unequal, well, wealth becomes unequal too. So it definitely contributes to the inequalities in the unequal distribution of wealth. So going over some history of housing discrimination, I want to speak about redlining and what it is. In the 1930s, the federal government creating housing maps that graded or rated neighborhoods by a so-called risk level. Redlining is the practice of denying people access to credit because of where they live, even if they are personally qualified for loans. It doesn't look at credit, it doesn't look at income, it purely looks at things like race and the area that you are located. Historically, mortgage lenders once widely redlined core urban neighborhoods and black populated neighborhoods. The federal government played a key role in institutionalizing and encouraging redlining through the Federal Housing Administration, the FHA. The FHA was the founder of federally sponsored redlining from 1934 through the 1960s. Other agencies, such as the Federal Reserve, regulated the banks and thrifts that originated or bought the FHA insured loans. Of the interactions between the Federal Reserve and the FHA, the Fed chair Mariner Eccles, which by the way is from Utah, was intimately involved in drafting the legislation that created the FHA, but left little record of his views about the FHA's redlining practices. Later on in 1968, the Fair Housing Act outlawed racially motivated redlining and tasked federal financial regulators, including the Federal Reserve. Black and minority neighborhoods were outlined in red, in the maps. So on the next slide, I will show you a website. It's an interactive map that it shows you any city, or at least the major cities in the US, and you can see in real time the redlining. I will show you here on the next slide for Salt Lake City. So here specifically for Salt Lake City, as you can see, just 7% of just 7% of the whole area is marked as best. So this means that this is mostly where white people are located, they reside. And then 25% says still desirable, 15% definitely declining, and as you can see, the majority of the space is marked as red, as hazardous. And sadly enough, or coincidentally, this is where more of the minority groups reside in this area. You can check it out for any city, but this is just the one for Salt Lake City. And then some more history from the early 1900s all the way through the 70s. Some clauses that were known as racial covenants existed, and they were property deeds that banned selling homes to black or non-white buyers. So segregation and discrimination towards any racial group that was not white. Federal housing policies during this time helped white families move to suburban neighborhoods, but often excluded minorities. Later, urban renewal projects destroyed many minority communities in the name of progress, often to build highways or commercialize zones. These policies created generational wealth for white families while limiting that opportunity for others. And then housing discrimination today. Even though laws like the Fair Housing Act outlaw discrimination, it still exists in more subtle ways. So even though that was removed back in 1968, the effect and the discrimination carries on to this day. Black and Hispanic borrowers are denied mortgages more often than white applicants with similar income and credit. As I mentioned earlier, homes in majority black neighborhoods are also undervalued by around $48,000 on average, according to Brookings. This undervaluation means families earn less equity and pass down less wealth, blocking generational wealth for many minority families. This is why the generational wealth concept is so important to talk about, because it has to do with the allocation of the wealth being mostly for white buyers. I also want to mention a little bit about the labor market and how it affects the housing inequality. On average, black households earn only about 60 to 65% of the income of white households. Job discrimination, occupational segregation, and unstable employment all make it harder to save for down payments or qualify for loans. When people face limited income and unstable work, it restricts their access to home ownership, reinforcing the cycle of inequality. Here is a graph that shows the gap between black and white home ownership rates and how it has widened since the 1900s. This chart is from 2015, but you can see that today the home ownership remains very wide. About 72% of white families own homes compared to 45% for black people and 48% for Hispanics. Since home ownership drives wealth, these gaps translate into huge wealth gaps and differences in net worth. The result is a widening racial wealth gap that affects not just individuals but entire communities. And then lastly, some of my proposed solutions for racial inequality in housing. Addressing racial inequality in housing requires both policy reform and a shift in how we view home ownership. Right now, it is seen as a privilege, unfortunately, as are many of other things in our society, but it should be a pathway to equality. We need stronger enforcement of the Fair Housing Act, expansion of affordable housing programs, and targeted down payment assistance for low income low income first time buyers. No race considered. We need community in reinvestment in historically redlined areas to rebuild equity. Fair access to housing as well would be critical. And it's not just about where people live, it's about stability, opportunity, and economic justice. Thank you for listening to my presentation.